Let me see if I got my computer going. Okay. So we will, out of respect for VEDIC, also chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, very good. Thank you all for those of you who are here on time. Okay, so tonight, we're going to do a couple things tonight. I think some of you were here at the last program. We talked about the Radha Damodar season is this month, Kartik, which is for 30 days. It actually started on the 15th, which was Saturday, which is OJAI Day, which means we offer a candle to Damodar. There's a nice picture right there. Johnny put a nice picture up. So we'll do that a little later tonight. We've had that discussion a couple times now, so I'm not going to dwell on it, but I'm going to try to give everybody a couple minutes at the end, and we'll play a video and just let everybody do that before we eat. But tonight, and I actually apologize, these two programs should have been flipped over. We should have done the one we're doing tonight last time, and the one we're doing last time should have been done tonight. But considering I got a calendar upside down, tonight we're going to be talking about Ramachandra's Vijayotsava, which is the time or the celebration or the festival when Lord Ramachandra actually finally puts Ravana away, basically defeats him. So this involves the discussion of who Lord Ramachandra is and the Sita Ram story, which is basically elaborately explained. And it's an epic tale, just as the Mahabharata is an epic tale in the Indian tradition, which includes the Bhagavad Gita as one of the chapters towards the middle end of the Mahabharata. The Ramayana is a similar epic story. And I'm just curious, from a show of hands here, maybe we should do this on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being like you're a scholar on the Ramayana, and 1 being you don't know anything about it at all. Can I just get a count from people around the room? Just say where you'd find yourself, 6, 3, 4, 2, 1, whatever it was. Taruni, you want about a 4?
4 to 5.
4 to 5. Gary? 1? 1? Francisco? 1? Okay. 6? Okay, good. Anna? She's on a 0 level? She's passing. 1? 1. Okay. I kind of suspected that. About a 5. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought we'd have tonight. So we have a cross between kind of really new people and people who have some familiarity with the story. And I'm not particularly an expert in this story either, but I've taken a few notes here. And I'd like to just review the tale a little bit, and if you all want to throw in pieces that I might leave out. But for those of you who don't have any familiarity with the story at all, Ramachandra was actually, we recognize him as the perfect incarnation of God. And in this case, instead of coming as Krishna, as a Kshatriya warrior, prince, and also the belover of the gopis, in his full original form, this time he's coming actually as an administrating king and trying to set the example. And for those of you who got the newsletter, without turning this into a political discussion, which I really don't want to do, we all know right now America is going through a whole breakdown in terms of our politics. And it really kind of raises questions in terms of what is really the best way to run a government. And this democracy Prabhupada used to kind of somewhat tongue-in-cheek refer to it as demon crazy. And everybody's voting for everybody, and and I've said many, many times that democracy can't work because it requires 2 very important things. One is it requires everybody actually has access to all the adequate information to be able to select the proper candidate, which we don't have. I mean, I think everybody knows that we're not always given all the information, and even when you're given information, it's a mess trying to figure out what's true and what's propaganda and what's politics and and all the backstabbing and so forth. And the other thing is it assumes that the entire population is educated and mature enough to be able to sort out what is important from what is not important, and ultimately that involves things like what is the purpose of life and so forth. And unfortunately, that is also something that's not very prominent in today's world today. So naturally, we have the end result, which is total chaotic political system. So back in the days of Lord Ramachandra, who appeared in the Treta Yuga, And again, I don't know how many people are familiar with the Vedic timetable. We've talked about this on some other evenings. But right now we're in the beginning of Kali Yuga, only 5,000 years in. The previous Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, was 860-some thousand years. And then Treta Yuga begins before that. So, in rough numbers, and I'm not sure exactly when in Treta Yuga was 1,200,000 years long. So assuming it was somewhere in the middle of that, we're talking about minimum 1,000,000 years ago is when Lord Ramachandra appeared. So, this is where we start crossing over into, whoa, that's not what they taught me in high school. In fact, the evolutionists will be telling you that about 1,000,000 years ago is when Homo sapiens, is it Homo sapiens, I think it is, or Homo erectus, started standing up straight and actually started walking around and became the forerunners of human life. Well, that's what they say. We say actually Aryan civilization in India was really, really prospering, and Lord Ramachandra is one point along that calendar that we're going to be talking about tonight. And then, of course, if we go back to the beginning of Satya Yuga, then we're talking about conservatively 200 million years ago. And again, that's when the evolutionists would say, what do they call it? Homo habitus, which is when the brain, this is evolution now, they say that our brain was starting to become bigger, and what's the other thing it said? We began using our hands to make stone tools. But actually we know, according to the Vedic tradition, according to the history in our Srimad Bhagavatam, back then in Treta Yuga it was a thriving civilization where everybody was actually practicing the 4 legs of Dharma. And it was a very high cultivation. Prabhupada used to say, we're so proud nowadays because we eat on plastic plates, but back then they used to eat on gold and silver because people managed things much more properly. So, anyhow, we have Lord Ramachandra. He came as the son of Dasarath, who was in the Raghu dynasty, or the Sun dynasty. And I'm going to really expedite this because there's so many little details. It's a wonderful story. If you haven't read it, it's really worth reading. Of course, all of our books are worth reading, but these books tend to be more kind of like, I don't know how to say it. They're not entrenched in philosophy, but there certainly is a lot of codes of ethics and moral stuff that's taught. It's not so much like the Bhagavatam.
It's not as heady.
It's not as heady. That's a good way to put it. So Lord Ramachandra was the son of Dasarath, and he was kind of destined to take over the kingdom. But his Dasarath's second wife, he owed her a boon because she saved his life in the previous battle somewhere earlier in their life together. And he had owed her a boon, and she got provoked by, I believe it was Kaikeya, who was the envious nurse, and she started putting these evil thoughts into her head and said, you don't want Ram to be the king, you want your son Bharat to be the king, and you should insist that Lord Dasarath, King Dasarath, not enthrone Ramachandra, but enthrone Bharat. And of course, initially the queen was like, oh, that's silly, don't think about that. Ramachandra did have a reputation for being an extraordinary individual. We'll find out more about that in a little bit. And she said, that's ridiculous. But, they say even a drop of water wears away a stone. And she just kept nagging and nagging and nagging. And then finally, the queen went to King Dasarath, and she said, you owe me a boon, remember? And he said, oh, yes, I remember. You saved my life. And so at some point, she said to him, well, I would like to collect on that boon now. And I would like you to enthrone my son Bharat and not Ramachandra. And of course, from that point forward, Dasarath became extremely conflicted. But being a king, and these are the Vedic days when people say what they do and believe what they say and follow their honor and hold up their words, he was bound to give her the boon that she had asked. And so he kept on saying to her, please ask for anything else. I'll give you wealth, I'll give you riches, whatever you want. But please do not ask for that. But she insisted. And so consequently, he had to call Ramachandra in. Now keep this in mind, Ramachandra, being the extraordinary person that he was, his father was just having a real hard time telling him I can't, He said, what is it, Father? What is it, Father? It can't be that bad. He said, oh, it's terrible, it's terrible, it's terrible. And then finally, he spit it out, and he said, well, here's the deal. I have to ask you to renounce your position as the king. We're going to coronate Bart instead. And, of course, Ramachandra said, what's the big deal about? That's not a problem. He was really completely detached. And he said, my brother Bart's a great king. I have no problem with it. So immediately we can start seeing the Vedic mentality of these people are not kind of what we see today, where we have a whole bunch of mad people trying to be political leaders and so forth, and they're doing whatever it takes to get there. Whereas Ramachandra, being actually emissary of God, was very renounced, and he said, if that's what my father wishes, that's what he gets. And there's no question of what I want. I'm going to serve my father. That's also part of the Vedic tradition, is you be very respectful of what your parents are asking. So anyhow, the time comes, and eventually what happens is, but the queen had two boons. One was that, and the other one was that Ramachandra has to be banned to the forest, because she didn't want her son to be, and this is really interesting, because people with evil minds come up with all sorts of stuff. And she was believing that if Ramachandra stuck around, he would undermine the authority of her son. So she said he has to be banned to the forest. And of course that just crushed Dasarath even more. And so again, he was saying to Ramachandra, he said, Ramachandra said, what is it, Father? What is it? Oh, well, there's more. It gets worse. And he goes, how much worse could it get? And he said, well, actually, you can't even stick around and enjoy the palace with your new wife, Sita. We're going to send you to the forest for 14 years. And, he said, well, what's the problem? Oh, that's happy. I'll be happy to do that. He didn't have a problem with it. But then he realized he was just married to Sita, and he's going, oh my God. So he was going to, but then Sita came up and said, well, if my husband goes to the forest, I follow my husband. That is the Vedic principle. And of course, Ramachandra's going, no. This forest is no place for a lady with soft, tender feet to be, with wild animals and so forth. She said, there's no question of me not following you. And one of the things was, I believe it was also part of the request, that he had to kind of renounce all of his jewels and his comforts and live like a mendicant. So try to imagine, you're basically going to be coordinated, and within a few weeks, all of a sudden now you're banned to the forest, and you're wearing monk's clothes, and you're going to have to fend for yourself. And now your wife is saying, I'm coming with you. And, Lord Ramachandra, he gave some arguments and tried to discourage it. But in the end, she used the principles of the Vedic chastity of the wife and said, how can you not allow me to come? My life would end without being in your presence. And ultimately, he won her approval. She won his approval, and she agreed to go. And of course, then Lord Lakshman, Ramachandra's brother, he jumps in and goes, well, if you guys are going, I'm going too. And he goes, no, it's not, you don't have to go. And he said, no, because they had a very tight relationship. And he comes up with all of his reasons for why he's got to go also. So now, all these very high personalities in the court of Dasarath are going to leave the court and go to the forest. And what do you know what happens? But, it's so heartbreaking that King Dasarath actually dies. He's just overwhelmed with grief that this is happening. And he dies. And so, some people are going like, oh, that's ridiculous. Okay, well, that happened. So, I believe at this point, Brother Ronnie, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe at this point, there's a petition made that, well, now you don't have to go because Dasarath has passed away. And he goes, no, I still have to go because I gave my word to my father. And even though he may not be here, I still have to go. I still need to go. Or actually, I think maybe he passed away just after he left, and then they sent people out to get him, and they said, you can go back now because your father passed away, and you're released to this burden. And he said, no, I'm not released to the burden. I gave a promise that I would stay for 14 years or whatever it was. And so he felt about it. So he went out to the forest. And so one thing happens after another. They deal with the forest. There's all sorts of very interesting stories tied in here. And at some point, the next pivotal point in the story is that Lady Sita They finally find some hermitage. They go through several villages and they meet a lot of the people in the kingdom. And, they finally find some place where they can live. And all the people that they go to, all the villages, they're saying, well, the King Ramachandra, oh my gosh, stay here with us, stay here with us. And they're constantly offering them places to be comfortable. We'll serve you. We'll give you all sorts of comforts. You don't have to worry about it. And Lord Ramachandra, being a man of high integrity, said, nope, that's not what I promised. I promised I would live in the forest as a hermit. Therefore, I have to do that. I can't cut corners here. And so he pushes on and finally goes to some very desolate place in the forest. And he sets up a little tiny hut for his lady Sita. And Lakshman, of course, is very vigilant, and they're guarding her, protecting her, and everything. And then one day, a beautiful little golden deer comes along and totally enamors Lady Sita. Now, keep in mind, at this point, this big demon on the hill, or on an island actually, Ravana, catches word of the fact that there is a beautiful princess living in the forest. And actually, prior to this, while Lord Ramachandra and his brother Lakshman are foraging through the forest, they meet this witch who, what was her name? Supanika. And she's another one of these really, low-minded type of people. And she approaches Ramachandra, who's a Kshatriya, and she says, oh, King, you are such a beautiful man. I want to marry you. And, of course, Ramachandra is saying, I can't marry you. I'm sorry, I'm already married. She says, oh, it's all right. Back then, you could have multiple wives. And she said, it's all right. And he said, no, you'll never be satisfied with me as being the second wife. I have my beautiful Sita. And he said,
he had taken a vow to have only one wife.
He had taken a vow to only have one wife, too. So at that point, they have a little mockery. He goes, but my brother Lakshman over here, he's available. Why don't you marry him? He's a nice, strong guy, too. And, of course, Lakshman's having a little sort of semi-heart attack. He said, what are you doing, you idiot? I don't want to marry this witch. And so they go back and forth, and he's saying, no, actually, you had the right idea the first time. You really want to marry Ram. And at some point, she gets very, very frustrated, and they get into a skirmish, and Lord Ramachandra, out of necessity, has to teach her a lesson. She starts throwing insults and getting very nasty. And so what he does actually, I think he cuts off the tip of her nose. And, of course, that's a pretty major flesh wound. And even though I believe she was already pretty ugly, it just made it worse. And this Supanika is actually the sister of this king, Ravana, who lives in the isle of what we now know as Lanka. And she goes home and just cries her heart out to her brother, and she tells him that there's this extraordinarily beautiful woman living in the forest, which of course gets Ravana's hormones going, and he decides, and Ravana was a very powerful person. He was able to do all sorts of austerities, and he basically was indefeatable. And he really thought a lot of himself. And he felt like, I can get whatever I want, and I want that woman. I'm going to go out there and take her. And so he devises this scheme with the Marichi, I believe his name was, and says, Marichi, go and bring me back this woman. And so Marichi, create a diversion so I can snatch this woman. And so he goes there, and he turns himself into this beautiful deer, this golden deer, and he lures Sita's mind. And this is where, again, there's all sorts of stories into these little legends here about how, be careful, where your mind goes. And Sita's going, oh my gosh, it's such a beautiful deer, it's such a beautiful deer. Go get it for me, Ram. And Ram's going, yeah, it's not a good idea. And she's going, no, but I want it. And then this whole big thing goes on. She says, how can you call me my husband? And I'm asking you to do a simple thing, and you're a great warrior. You don't even want to go get a little deer. You must not love me. And she does this woman breakdown thing. And Ramachandra is going, okay, fine. So he says, Lakshman, you stay here. You watch Sita. Do not leave her alone. I'll go get the deer. So he runs off, chasing after the deer. So then, the way the story goes is Marichi then feigns the call of Ramachandra like he's in trouble. Help! And of course, Sita hears this, and Lakshman goes, don't worry, nothing's going to mess with Ram. Whatever you heard is not what you should think it is. Have faith in your husband. He is a tremendously powerful warrior. And she's going, how can you say that, Lakshman? And she does another woman's thing on Lakshman, excuse me for the reference, but she basically says to Ram, he says, Lakshman, oh, you just want to enjoy me on your own. You don't want to follow up. I'm telling you, I really need to go. I want that deer. My husband's in trouble, and you don't care, and you just want in the past. And of course, Lakshman gets to the point where he goes, okay, I just can't keep putting her off. This is not a good idea. So he draws a magic circle. And he says, as long as you stay within the circle, nothing will hurt you. So please follow my instructions. Stay within the circle. So Lakshman goes chasing off and looking for Ram. And eventually he catches up and sees Ram. Ram says to him, what are you doing here? And he says, I told you not to leave Sita. And he goes, and of course they all of a sudden realize something really tricky is going on. And meanwhile, Ravana, who's this big Ted-headed, gnarly, nasty king, powerful king, he's approaching the hut, and he's disguised as a Brahmin, because he had these mystic powers. And he comes to the hut, and he says, lady, the etiquette back then was if a Brahmin comes to the hut, you should serve them some fruit and some water, and they're wandering through the forest. And so he asks her some fruit and water. She says, oh, okay. So she brings the fruit and water out of the house. And I believe that he says, well, bring it to me over here. She said, no, I've been told not to go outside of the circle. And he goes, what's the big deal? He said, come on, you're supposed to serve me. I'm a Brahmin. I can't walk all the way. I'm too weak. You have to bring it over here. I'm sitting quietly now. Bring it to me. And they go back and forth. And eventually, through his convincing talk, she disobeys the instruction and steps outside of the magic circle. And of course, as soon as she steps out, because I guess Ravana apparently tried to cross over the line, and whenever he did, it was kind of like, Star Trek, where you get zapped by the force field or something. And he couldn't get through the force field, so he realizes that, they're playing dirty pool here. I can't get to her. So he convinces her to come out, and of course, as soon as she does, he snatches her, gets on his flower airplane, flies off. And encounters Jatayu, who is this very loyal guard and friend of Ramachandra. And he puts up a heroic fight, try to save her, but ultimately he can't defeat Ravana. And he basically crashes to the ground, and Ravana flies off. And he takes her to Lanka. And the story goes on and on and on. And basically what happens is Lord Ramachandra eventually catches up to Jatayu, comes home, and he goes, she's gone, of course. And he goes, what's going on? Sita's gone. And this is really where the plot of the story gets very, very deep. And, the whole battle of good over evil is really emphasized here. And all the tribulations that Lord Ramachandra has to go through to, first of all, figure out where she is, and then track her down. And eventually, he gets a word from Jatayu. They see him. He sends out his, he goes out and finds Jatayu. And Jatayu's basically on his last breath and shares with him that, this guy Ravana took your wife. And so Ramachandra goes, oh, okay. And of course, a lot of this is sort of made for our benefit because Ramachandra was a personality of God. So we kind of knew a lot of this stuff already. But he was playing the role of this king, this righteous king. So eventually he gets together and he finds out Ravana lives out on this island, and he meets all the Hanuman and the Monkey King, Sugriva, and he solicits their help. They build this bridge by throwing rocks. He petitions the ocean. This is an interesting part of this story. And in fact, there are, I should be actually put this down right now. These are all the stories. You'll see some of the pictures here of what we're talking about. I have it brought up. So he petitions the ocean, and he says, he tries very politely. He says, "Dear ocean," he says, I got to get over to the other side where the Ravana's got his big palace at the island. So could you create access for me to get there? Kind of like the parting of the seas or whatever way they want to do it. And he's very vigilantly praying, and of course the ocean god not really responding. And after 3 days, and everybody's waiting, and they're all kind of going, what's going to happen? Ramachandra actually starts getting a little upset. He says, okay, look, I'm trying to be nice about this, but if you don't want to cooperate here, I will just burn everything in the ocean and it will completely evaporate and I'll do it my way. So we can either do it my way, or what do they say? You can use either the easy way or the hard way. Right? And so at that point, the demigod of the ocean, I believe it's Vayu, shows up and he goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I think there's a picture of it in their thing here. It may come up. And he goes, wait, Lord Ramachandra. He said, really, I'm sorry, but this is not really a good thing here. And he basically gives, again, some deep philosophical explanation about how you're not really setting a very good example if you get angry and you dry up the ocean and you kill all the animals in the ocean. That's not a very good thing. And so he says, why don't we do this? It'll make you more heroic. Why don't you get all the Hanuman monkeys and build this bridge with rocks? And they agree to doing this. So eventually, you see all these pictures, you'll probably see a few here, of the monkeys helping Hanuman make this bridge. They go, and there's more stories. Hanuman goes there, confirms that Sita's there. He gets caught. He practically burns the place down because he's a powerful monkey. And eventually, these are some stylized versions of Ravana. Eventually, he gets there, and then he has this big war, and he kills Ravana, and he regains Sita, and she comes back. And then there's this whole thing that happens at this point, because this is over the course of, I think, like 8 or 9 months. It took a while for all this to happen. So there's another really interesting part of the story where Lord Sita, when Lord Ramachandra, when Sita finally is reunited, and by now the curse is over, they're going to go back to Ayodhya. He's now going to take over his position as being the king. And a lot of the people are going, whoa. Lady Sita was in the residence or in the custody of another man. And we don't know what happened between her and Ravana while you were trying to figure out where she was. And of course, the Ramayana has all these episodes in there where she's praying severely. And of course, Sita is pure as white snow. And she would basically give up her own life before she'd let Ravana touch her. And Ravana was cursed that he couldn't force himself on anybody, so she had to willingly give herself. And he kept on saying, well, either you give yourself to me, and towards the end he started saying things like, otherwise I'm going to have you for breakfast, because he was kind of a Rakshasa, he wasn't a very nice guy. And so he was threatening her in these ways. And eventually Sita goes, but Sita stays true to her word, and especially when she meets Hanuman, she realizes that now her husband knows where she is. She's completely confident. It's just a matter of time until all 10 of Ravana's heads are cut off and rolling in the street. And so eventually they do have their big battle. There's one of the pictures will come up, show you the ferocious battle, all these people flying around. But then they finally come back and they come to Ayodhya with the idea that they're now going to rule Ayodhya, which is what they originally intended to do. This is Hanuman. One of the monkey warriors who was in doubt. Hanuman had there's some interesting stories behind Hanuman. He was given a benediction when he was a young monkey that he could basically do any mystical thing he wanted to do. And so when he was really, really young, he just started creating, because he's a monkey, monkeys generally cause havoc. And so he started creating all this havoc for all of the mystic sages trying to do their fire sacrifice. And he'd go in there and mess around with the fire and swing from the trees and create all sorts of havoc so it would ruin the sacrifices. And so what happened is finally one of the sages said, we can't stop this monkey because he's been given all these benedictions. But what we can do is we can bewilder him so he forgets that he has all these benedictions. And so that's what they do. They create some spell. So Hanuman then is covered over, thinking, again, there's all sorts of stories in here about how much we limit ourselves from our own conditioning. And he goes back to thinking he's just another normal monkey. And so when they have to cross the ocean, here they're building the bridge. When they have to cross the ocean and Ramachandra is puzzling over what to do, one of the sages show up and tell Ramachandra, or somehow he realizes that Hanuman actually has these tremendous benedictions. And so what they do is they break the spell, and they help Hanuman understand that now he's this tremendous warrior, and he can do all this far out stuff. So he flies across the ocean, and then he really starts getting back into this, wow, I can do all this stuff, but I'm going to use it for Lord Ramachandra. So that's the relationship he has. But here's the last point I want to make. So when Sita comes home, all the people are going, Sita spent 10 months in the home of another man, and her integrity was under question from the common people. And again, there's all these stories in there about the decency between the relationship between men and women and so forth. And but Ramachandra knew that the people would question her purity. And so what he did was he said when they actually got united, he created this fire. And he said, Sita, you got to walk through the fire. And of course, people were like, you can walk through the fire. That's not a very nice thing to say to your wife after she's been tied up for 8 months with some monstrous person. But Lord Ramachandra knew Sita was also given mystic potency, that her purity would protect her from the flames of the fire. So she walks through the fire, and everybody's like, but she actually basically passed the fire test, if you will, and comes out the other side. And then people realize that had she broken her vows, then that wouldn't have worked out so well. Yet still, this lingering doubt created all sorts of havoc in the eyes of the people, which eventually created more trouble later after Ramachandra started ruling, and he eventually had to ask Sita to go away again. And that's all sorts of deep philosophical stuff goes on at that part of the story. So anyhow, that in a nutshell, here's Lord Ramachandra petitioning the ocean demigod and saying, you better do this or otherwise there's going to be some nasty stuff here. And the ocean Vayu god is saying, well, wait, let's talk about this a little bit. Huh?
This is Ramayana?
Yeah, this is Ramayana. This is all Ramayana.
One book?
I think I got a copy of it somewhere up on the shelf here. Anyhow, yeah, it's a sizable book. So, with that in mind, now that I've just I've ate up most of our time, I want to do, I'm going to try to at least do the academic side of the program tonight, which is we're going to read one verse from the Bhagavad Purana. It's a little bit of an awkward evening because I didn't...
Fire test.
Huh?
We need to reinstate the fire test.
You like that one, guys. Whoops, we don't want to do this. Where are we going here? We're going through... Okay, so there's the deer, and that's Ram. Ram has a green complexion, and that's Sita.
And they always show him with a bow and arrow.
Of course, he's always shown with a bow and arrow. And that's Lakshman kind of checking out. He's sort of like, playing guard and stuff like this. And she goes, oh, look at the beautiful deer. I want, go get him for me. Okay, so what we're going to do now, if I get the computer to cooperate, we're going to go back to the Bhagavad. Now, in this case, most of the time, this is called the Bhagavad Gita as it is fellowship discussion. Most of the time, we try to draw something from the Bhagavad Gita, but we're trying to constantly kind of expand and get everybody to be aware of the fact that there's so much tremendous knowledge out there and resources. Bhaktivinoda Swami is, he's translated the entire Bhagavad Purana, and this is one of the later verses. This is the 9th canto of the Bhagavad Purana, chapter 11, and I'll bring it down so you can see what it says. So the 9th canto, the subject is based on, the discussion there is liberation. And this particular chapter, chapter 11, is Lord Ramachandra rules the world. And so I picked out one verse that I thought would be kind of appropriate for tonight, and we will go through it like we normally do and read the purport. And then, depending on where we are, I'm going to really try not to yak till as long as we've been in the last couple of meetings. We'll sort of see where we go from there. Maybe have some questions and answers.
So what is the Mahabharata?
What's that?
The Maha...
It's a different book.
It's a different book. So that's before Ramayana, or it's a collection of...
Actually, Mahabharata would come after Ramayana, because Ramayana, well, when they were written is another thing, but the pastime we were talking about earlier is in Treta Yuga, and Mahabharata, in the story of Untitled Chapter, happens 5,000 years ago in just north of Delhi, India. So historically, I feel pretty comfortable suggesting that the Ramayana predates the...
It ends with Krishna love, Sita's children.
What's that?
The ending ends with Kush and love, Sita's children from Ramachandra.
Yeah.
In the Mahabharata, so it is covered in the Mahabharata story.
Okay. So they're referencing it, so obviously it came before.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so here we go. Let's read this together, and then we'll read the purport. It's kind of a simple little purport, but for those of you who are considering or exploring and want to learn more about some of these books, this is a real nice verse for tonight. There's only really one chapter in the Bhagavad Purana about Lord Ramachandra. It's not the Ramayana, but it makes reference to the Ramayana, which kind of they sort of self-validate each other. So let's do the English, then we'll go back and we'll do a little bit of the Sanskrit. Keep an eye on both these computers. Okay, so please repeat after me. King Parikshit. Anyone who orally received the narrations concerning the characteristics of Lord Ramachandra's pastimes will ultimately be freed from the desires of envy and thus be liberated from the bondage of fruitive activities. Okay, let's do a little of the Sanskrit just to... Again, I'd like to do this just so people can really appreciate that there's some real history here, there's some real academia and some real validity to what we're teaching here. We're not just pulling things out of a hat. Okay, so let's do the Sanskrit here a little bit. Purusha, any person. Ramacharitam, the narrations concerning the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Ramachandra. Shravanar, by oral reception. Upadarayan, simply by this process of hearing. Anshramsya para, being completely freed from envy. Rajan, O King Pariksit. Karma bandar, by the bondage of fruitive activities. Vimuchyate, one becomes liberated. Okay, so here we go.
Why does one become liberated from the bondage of fruitive activities?
Because the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra are so pure that if you can really appreciate them, they will purify your mind. So like associating with saintly people and associating with Krishna, chanting Hare Krishna mantra, anything to do with saintly people will automatically have its cleansing and potency to start lifting the soul. So let's do the Sanskrit together. Purusho, Rama, Charitam, Purusho, Rama, Charitam, Sarvaner, Upadarayan, Shravane Rupadarayan, Anshamsya Parorajan, one word at a time. Anshamsya Paro Rajan, Anshamsya Paro Rajan, Karma Bander Vimuchyate, Karma Bander Vimuchyate, Purusho Ramacharitam, Sravaner Upadarayan, Anshamsya Paro Rajan, Karma Bander Vimuchyate, Purusho Ramacharitam, Sravaner Upadarayan, Anshamsya Paro Rajan, Karma Bander Vimuchyate. Okay, who would like to try it? Come on, this is an easy one. Go ahead.
I don't know if I can sing.
That's all right. Just do the best you can.
Purusha Ramacharitam,
Purusho Ramacharitam,
Shravane Rupadarayan,
Sravane Rupadarayan,
Anshamsya Parorajan,
Anshamsya Paro Rajan,
Karma Bander Vimuchyate.
Karma Bander Vimuchyate. Anybody else want to try? Go ahead, Mark. Shravanir Upadayan Anshamsya Parorajan Karma Bandir Vimuchyate. Very good. I'd like everybody to know that Kamala is, I think it's your first time here?
Yeah.
And she did really good. That's all right. We're very happy. That's not common when people come here for the first time and they go right out of the blocks. It does happen on a rare occasion. So. Anybody else want to try it? Okay.
I'll try it.
Okay.
Purusho Ramacharitam
Purusho Ramacharitam
Shravanir Upadayaram
Sravanir Upadayan
Anshramsha Parorajan
Anshamsya Parorajan
Kamabandir Vimuchyate.
Karma Bandir Vimuchyate. Okay. That was pretty good. You do it every time. You do it a little bit each time. You get it. You get it. Okay, so I'll read it again. O King Parikshit, anyone who orally receives the narrations. Okay, just to make sure everybody remembers now. Sukadeva Goswami is, this whole big 18,000 verses is Sukadeva Goswami explaining to King Parikshit, who's cursed to die in 7 days, all of these extraordinary pastimes ultimately for all of our benefits, but so that he can really focus his mind and become completely fixed in his meditation on Sri Krishna and all of his particular, in this case, his manifestation as Ramachandra. So he's no longer distracted because he's going to die shortly after this discourse. Okay? So that's why you're seeing here, Sukadeva Goswami is saying, he's addressing him. He's saying, O King Parikshit, anyone who orally receives the narrations concerning the characteristics of Lord Ramachandra's pastimes will ultimately be freed from the desires of envy and thus be liberated from the bondage of fruitive activities. Purport. Here in this material world, everyone is envious of someone else. Even in religious life, it is sometimes found that if one devotee is advanced in spiritual activities, other devotees are envious of him. Such envious devotees are not completely freed from the bondage of birth and death. As long as one is not completely freed from the cause of birth and death, one cannot enter into the Sanatana Dharma or the eternal pastimes of the Lord. One becomes envious because of being influenced by the designations of the body. But the liberated devotee has nothing to do with the body, and therefore he is completely on a transcendental platform. Body, keep in mind, remember in the Bhagavad Gita it says there's 8 material things. There are first 5 we all kind of know: earth, water, fire, air, ether. But then it goes on to explain there's 3 subtle elements which are part of the body. I'm trying to tie this together a little bit here. Does anybody know what the 3 subtle ones are? Anyone want to venture? Mine's one of them. What's that?
Or the emotion.
Well, boom, I'll say it in Sanskrit, give it away. Bhumir ponolo vayu kammano buddha eva cha. Ahankara ityami bina prakritir ashtataha. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego are the other 3 material elements. Those are not spiritual attributes. Those are material attributes. So when they're talking about how people are attached to the body, that means they're attached to their mind, their false ego, and their intelligence, which the soul is riding behind all of that, which is the pure spiritual spark. So people get caught up, and I'm so intelligent, or I'm so, look at me, ego, I'm such a wonderful person, oh, I deserve this, I deserve that. Those things, we all know, we all dealt with people that get trapped in those things. That's what they're referring to here. Those sages don't have anything to do with that stuff. They transcend it. And therefore he is completely on the transcendental platform. A devotee is never envious of anyone, even his enemy, because the devotee knows that the Lord is the supreme protector. He thinks, what harm can the so-called enemy do? Thus a devotee is confident about his protection. The Lord says, Yayatamam prapadyante tansataya vajameyam. According to the proportion of one's surrender unto me, I respond accordingly. I like this because there's some traditions that teach, all you gotta do is say, I'm in the game, and you get everything. Which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But in Krishna consciousness, we learn that no, to the degree which you give yourself, you give your heart, you give your service, you give your time, you give your meditation to Krishna, to that degree. In fact, actually, there's many places where it says, the old saying the devotees say, you take one step to Krishna, he'll take 10 steps to you. He's more anxious to restore a relationship with us than we are with him. We keep on getting sucked into thinking, I want to do this, I want to do that. He's just saying, yeah, good luck with that.
And it specifically says surrender.
Yeah, and you have to surrender. You have to stop thinking that I've got it all under control, because generally for most of us, we don't have it under control. That's part of the illusion. A devotee must therefore be completely free from envy, especially other devotees. To envy other devotees is a great offense, a Vaishnava aparad. This is sometimes referred to, or it's always referred to as, do you really know what it is? The mad elephant offense. Does anybody know why it's called the mad elephant offense?
Because when elephants get mad, they put up their thing and they put dirt all over everything.
Yeah, when an elephant will go into a pool and they will bathe, right? They'll go in a pond or a pool someplace and they'll go in and bathe. And they'll use their trunk like a little shower head and they'll come out and they'll all be all nice and clean. And the first thing they do is roll around in the dirt to dry themselves off. So it's kind of like, it's silly, it's like they took a bath but then they just roll around in the dirt. So
This one refers to more an elephant, the mad elephant, he actually just destroys everything.
that's also there.
So your spiritual life is like almost destroyed if you do that.
Yeah, it's like if you have a beautiful garden and you let an elephant start stampeding through it, there's not going to be much left. So the beautiful garden, of course, is the opportunity to become Krishna conscious. And there's really a lot of practical stuff here too, because Vaishnava, of course, means one who is a devotee of Vishnu. And without the association of other Vaishnavas, you don't got nothing. You're back into the world of speculating and figuring out for yourself and guessing and, the four flaws of imperfect senses, propensity to cheat, propensity to fall into illusion, and I missed one.
Mistakes.
Yeah, mistakes, thank you. So we really need to maintain association with other Vaishnavas to keep the Krishna Katha, or the discussion, Krishna, or the discussion of transcendence always forefront in our daily
So in
activities.
some sense, it's almost transcendental envy of a devotee.
Well, envy's not the right word there. In that case, you're respectful of a devotee. You're respectful, you're appreciating a devotee. Yeah, that's all. Yeah.
But you desire to have their devotional.
You want to aspire to become a sincere devotee. So yeah, there's other people that we might be inspired by.
That
Yeah.
transcendental.
Yeah.
In my mentor, I would just say, as it says, I like this, according to the proportion of one's surrender unto me, I respond accordingly. It's really interesting because on, say, my prior spiritual path of more of a mayesvara concept of just trying to become one with the absolute and everything.
Right.
It's kind of like you're always trying to make effort in your meditation to expand your consciousness, to experience higher states of consciousness. And all this kind of stuff.
Right.
But it's really interesting just to think of how it's such a different path to just get Krishna conscious realization or God realization through just your actual devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Right. In fact, actually, that is clearly and specifically delineated towards the end of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, Bhaktya tu ananyaya saktya aham evam vedarjuna. He specifically states, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am standing before you now. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. So if you think about it, this is an interesting question. If you were God and you wanted to communicate to the mankind that you were there, what would you do? Because if you make it too black and white, then where's the love? That's kind of like a shotgun wedding. I'm here, so worship me. So what Krishna's actually done is he said, well, if you surrender, then I start revealing myself. Radharani's made this point many times. We all do. That if in our own mundane relationships with other people, people are kind to us and people are safe, what do? We engage more in trusting them, in dialogue, in discussion. And people we're not safe with, what do? I'm not talking to that person. Right? So Krishna's the same way. He sees that, oh, somebody's actually showing some affection for me. That person I want to reveal more. It's a natural process amongst us, and with him, with us too. So,
reveals to those who seek him out.
yeah, and that's exactly what this Yayatamam Prabhajante Tamsataiva Vajanayaham. That's what this verse is all about. According to the propensity, proportion when surrender unto me, I respond accordingly. Very important verse. Okay. A devotee who constantly engages in hearing and chanting, Sravana Kirtana, is certainly free from the disease of envy, and thus he becomes eligible to go back home, back to Godhead. So that's the purport. I don't think there's any more of that. Yeah, next verse. Okay, so that's our little Sanskrit academia for tonight. We've got a few more minutes before we're going to break for the breakfast, or dinner rather. Okay, so I'll just bring a couple more things up. This is where, if there's anybody has any particular questions or curiosities about who Lord Ramachandra was, what I'd like to do now is in researching this, I found two or three different lists about the 16 qualities of Lord Ramachandra. And I'm going to go through this kind of quickly here, make a few comments as we go along. But I want you to keep in mind the difference between who Lord Ramachandra was back, over 1 million years ago, and how mankind has slipped into the mire that we're in now. And you just turn on television and listen to news, read newspapers. There's a million examples every day. But
It's probably the reason that you left television and newspapers at 25,000 years ago.
that's probably true.
That's really true.
Polluting our minds.
Yeah, but one thing that they had back then with the Vedas, they didn't even have to really speak them, they just knew them. So the transmission was much higher than the visual transmission.
Right.
Now.
Right. And also, keep in mind that our philosophies, for all of us living in the world today, we don't necessarily, in fact, this was one of the questions on the spiritual IQ test last weekend. We maybe get a chance to have some people comment on that. What's the difference between material and spiritual? And Prabhupada always really impressed upon us that you can use, the devotee dovetails everything in Krishna's service. So a television is not necessarily bad per se, but it depends on what it's used for. The radio is not necessarily bad. In fact, in LA, the devotees broadcast. They used to before the internet was up. Now they just do it over the internet. But we used to have a low wattage FM broadcaster at our temple. So anybody within the next 2 blocks could tune in on one of those high frequencies, 102.7 or something. And no, it was FM radio. It was basically an illegal FM broadcast station. It went about 3 or 4 blocks, and you could hear the devotees lecturing in the temple every morning at 7 o'clock. So we were using the radio in Krishna's service. So anyhow, here's I'm going to try to go this quickly. Here's 16 qualities. Gunavan, principled and endowed with excellent qualities. Now these are the qualities that, and I've kind of tried to bundle these together so we don't have 10 different lists, that people have recognized based on the stories of the Ramayana and history of the characteristics of Lord Ramachandra. So he's very principled and endowed with excellent qualities. Some of this isn't going to read. He indulged in pleasures without transcending social norms. So it's not like he was an ascetic sage. He wasn't like Lord Chaitanya, who was a renounced sannyasi. He was a king, and he had the whole functions of the kingdom at his disposal. He never spoke foul language, and he was very merciful. So the next one is Viryavan, endowed with prowess. Prowess means exceptionally valorous and powerful in war, and extremely capable in dealing with difficult situations. Though he was interested in earning money, he was fully aware about the higher truth and did all his spiritual practices. So again, he was engaged in money-raising activities, but he didn't let that interfere. And some of these things, if you think about it, it's a real juggling act, to be dealing with some of this stuff and not being entangled or contaminated by it. And again, valorous. Dharma ja. So dharma, we know the word dharma means principles, duties, and so forth. And this may have caused to him. And there's an example of that in the Ramayana. What was the name? Vibhishan? What was Ravana's brother? Vibhishan was Ravana's brother. And he heroically tried to stop Ravana from doing this nonsense that he was stealing Ram's wife. Because Vibhishan knew that this is not a good thing. This isn't going to go over well. So eventually what he did was he crossed the lines. He basically became a traitor. And when he first showed up, everybody was he's from Ravana, kill him. And Ram said, no, wait, stop. Because the duty of a Kshatriya, if somebody surrenders, immediately he has to protect him. So Vibhishan came and he immediately surrendered. He said, okay, you're as good as any one of my other warriors here. So these really high principles going on there. Kirtan, gracefully remembering even the little things done by others. How many times have we done something for somebody? It may even be something significant. They don't even say thank you. We've all been there before. You're bending over backwards, right? There's an old saying, no good deed goes unpunished, It's like you go to so much trouble to help, the next thing you get all the grief on you, right? So, but in Ramachandra's case, and I was instructing somebody, I think it was Harry I was telling this weekend, somebody came to the booth, and, Harry was very enthusiastic, and I said, no. I said, they have to show at least some tiny thread of appreciation. And even the slightest little thread, then we can really work with them. But this guy had sort of an attitude. That attitude's not working too well here. Okay. So, but if there's even the slightest little thread of just say, oh, that's a beautiful picture of Krishna. That's all it takes. But this guy couldn't even do that. He was he had a rough side to him. Grateful, okay. So even if somebody does a little service, we try to find some way of appreciating. Satya Vaktya, this is number 5, truthful in his statements. He never spoke lies, speaking true words, useful words. So there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Anugvega Kiram Vakyam Satyam Priyam Hitam Chayat. Austerity of speech consists of speaking truthfully and beneficially and avoiding speech which offends. And it also goes on, it says, and one should also recite the Vedas regularly, which means basically study the Vedas. So this is in Bhagavad Gita. That's one of the verses. Okay, Vritta Vrataha. That means one who's very determined. And determined to, stick to what it is you set out to do. Okay? So also there's a verse in the Gita, Yesantu Amskatam Papam Gyananam Punya Karmana Tedvantva Mohanirmukta Bhadantyamam Drita Vrataha. Same words, Vritta Vrataha. Persons who acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, are freed from the dualities of desires. So, but to get there, you have to have Vritta Vrataha. You have to be kind of determined to get there. If you get sidetracked and derailed by the smallest little thing somewhere in the process, then you're not Vritta Vrataha. How many times has any of us started a project and then got halfway through it and then put it on the shelf and didn't get back to it for 6 months, or maybe not at all? Okay, that's not Vritta Vrataha. What's that? It's happening to all the time. Miguel, true confessions from Miguel. It's happening all the time. Okay. All right, thank you for volunteering that little bit of information.
So, excuse me, when you mentioned the duality of desire, so even the desire,
the thing is, desires generally tend to lead us in all sorts of different directions, and so one of the points that we were making, and I make all the time, in some traditions,
or desire generally speaking,
just desire, just the concept of desire, wanting things. You've got to be careful for what you want. Okay. Now, in some traditions, they'll say you have to eliminate desire, or you have to eliminate ego. Can't do it. Eliminate all thoughts. You can't do it. I mean, they might be practicing for millions of years to do it, but Bhagavad Gita basically, in fact, this was specifically, this process, this Samkhya process was given in chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita, and Arjuna, who was far more capable than any of us here, he said, nah, I can't do that. In fact, the words he used was, the process of meditation that you're suggesting is more difficult than controlling the wind. Can't do it. So Arjuna, then Krishna says, okay, God, I'm glad you said that, because actually there's a lot easier way here. Just practice bhakti yoga. Okay. So we can't stop thoughts, we can't stop desires, but what we can do is we can redirect them
So then there's a verse in the Gita that said a yogi, stone or gold for him is the same.
Yes.
So is it to reach this level of spirituality that is it stopping?
That's a tricky question because what Krishna's trying to say at that point in the Gita is he's trying to say, from a yogi's point of view, it's still the gone, it's still material stuff. It's really not going to help you much at all with your spiritual wisdom or vision. Okay. However, as a practical matter, I mean, there was sure the Prabhupada was really good about this. Some people, there was once somebody came and gave Prabhupada a watch or some money or something. Prabhupada said, "Oh, thank you very much." And there was some envious person sitting there, and they said, he's not much of a yogi. Look, he's attached to material things, which is really popular about 40 years ago. People, I'm not attached to anything, And of course, Prabhupada was trying to teach that, well, for myself, I really have no personal need or desire for a watch. In fact, he was giving them away as fast as he was getting them. He would give a watch, he'd say, okay, take the other one, give it to his servant, put the new watch on. I mean, I know the devotee was his servant. It was like a constant, once a week, he was giving away a watch. So when you give him a watch, okay, new watch, put it on. He would honor the gift, put it on, and he'd wear it until the next watch came in. Then he'd take it off and leave it to the next person. So it was completely transcendental. He didn't care about the watch itself. But what he did care about was using it in Krishna's service. So he said, yeah, I'll take as much money as you want. Bring it all in here. But he didn't use it. I think we all know there's some, these mega churches with some of these ministers that are just, it's really a disgrace that they're just hauling in millions of dollars and building air-conditioned dog houses. And, what's that? And they're still cleaning more, and it's ridiculous, and I don't understand the people that support that kind of stuff. It's charity in the mode of ignorance. But if it's used like Prabhupada had a regular thing, half of the money, or the money that came into all of our temples was either used to support the temple or print books or distribute food. It wasn't so that he could live a luxurious lifestyle. In fact, he was very renounced, personally renounced. But he used all of it to build this incredible Krishna conscious, structure all around the world. In 12 years, 100 temples, almost overnight. So, okay, let's just keep going here. I don't know if I want to go through all these. It's getting a little late.
I just want to say something real quick that once a year down at the temple in Culver City, their children act out this play.
Yeah, sure. And actually, there's a lot of renditions of the Ramayana.
Nice because they're so young and they act out the story with little costumes and it's just really nice. They work on it for a long time. And it's usually on a Sunday when they have that.
Okay, I don't have my hands on it, but
That's also on that wonderful 10-hour something DVD set.
yeah, I was just looking for it. It's in here. I can't get to it from Worm City, but yeah, there's a big, huge thing like this. Has about 30 discs in it. Each disc has like 10 episodes. We were watching it last year when Radharani first came. Another one of these major productions. Let me just try to get through these real quick. Charit Sarnena, endowed with good conduct. Again, his behavior was impeccable. I try to imagine if, and it was so impeccable that the people loved him and they wanted to pay their taxes because they knew that if they needed something, Lord Ramachandra would be there to provide it and protect them. And he ran the government very, very well. Sarvabhuteshu Gita, benefactor of all living beings. I'm just going to shoot through this real quick. Vidyan, knower of everything. Sometimes I like to have fun with this. There's a verse, Dharmara Moshaya Mama Striti Yantite Te Brahma Te Vidu Krishna Adhyatman Karma Kalidam in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He actually goes, intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and death take refuge in me in devotional service. They are actually Brahman because they entirely know everything about transcendental activities. So in other words, if you had an issue with somebody, instead of, everybody getting backed off in the corner and gnarling at each other, you would be able to talk in such a way that you would come to a peaceful resolution. Yeah, just imagine. It's a dying skill. It's no longer around. Atmavan, courageous, self-fixed, and spiritual knowledge, not wavering. I got to know and by the matter, all these words, I didn't make these up. I'm just pulling them off other lists. This is interesting.
It's like steadfast.
Being stubborn for a larger good. In other words, hold it, do something good, stick to it. Don't let somebody discourage you. And in the world today, that's happening all the time. Gita Krodha, conqueror of anger. Krodha is anger. Gita means one who conquers anger. Okay. Duryaman, endowed with splendor and brilliance. This is kind of this is interesting. He says he never remembers what he gave to others, meaning when Lord Ramachandra gave somebody, he gave it. It wasn't like next week he said, well, I gave you that thing last week. We get attacked. You owe me. Right? No. Yeah, you owe me. And gave it, done. Detached. Wasn't keeping score. Anasuyaka, one who is free from envy. That's a big one. And I got one little verse here. Ye me tam idam nityam anartishtanti manava sarvam bhajano nishito uchite te nikarma vir. This is from the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions and who follow these teachings faithfully without envy become freed from the bondage of fruitive activities. So envy is something you got to keep an eye on. It's a tricky one. And the last one here is this is interesting. Jata Roshaya Asyam Samyak Deva Cha Vivate. This is real interesting for people who think that a spiritual person is never going to get into a conflict. Sometimes you need to put your feet down and say, not on my watch. So this one says, when provoked to war, even the gods are afraid of Lord Ramachandra. Meaning, if like that's what Vidishan knew. He said when Ravana was crossing on the shoulder, he said, you do not want to go to war with Ravana. This is not going to turn out well for you. Okay, so those are his virtues. Let me get the prayer up here. Well, keep in mind, it's just like in the Untitled Chapter. Krishna went to Duryodhana the night before the battle started. Keep in mind, this had been going on for many, many years, 14 years or so. And they were doing, so many times people were saying, Duryodhana, don't go to war with the Pandavas, it's not a good idea. And they were constantly saying, don't, of course, Duryodhana was the personified, demoniac, self-centered, arrogant individual who didn't think of anything except for himself at whatever costs he wanted. And of course, but the night before, Lord Krishna, setting the example of a good ambassador of peace, went to Duryodhana and said to him, look, the 5 Pandavas are kings. They're entitled to rule. In fact, it's their duty to rule. They don't need to rule the entire kingdom. Just give them 5 little villages, and we can end this now. Does anybody remember what he said? What Duryodhana said? Say it. No, Rajani. He said, I won't even give them enough land that you can stick a pin into. Which is not much. But it shows how envious and crazy Duryodhana was. So the point is that a saintly person does everything possible to avoid a nasty conflict. But sometimes you got to do something about the demonic people, and you got to stop it. That's part of their duty. That's the duty that's the dharma of the country. Okay, so let's say this together, and then we'll get on with the evening here. And we'll ask somebody to read the English when we're done. Jitendriya Deka Jive Kale Saya Sagare Dharma Jay English.